Hi, folks. I've got a little favor to ask. Voting in 48 Hills' 50th annual Best of the Bay Readers Poll is well underway. In addition to so many fun and important other categories, you have a chance to vote for Best Podcast. I'd be honored and excited if you vote for Storied San Francisco. I know you have plenty of shows to choose from, but I happen to think we're the best out there, and maybe you do too. Go to 48hills.org/bestofthebay to vote. Let's win this thing. Thanks.
And that's what I love about artist communities and the crossover that we're trying to create is that we can all kind of help lift each other up. It doesn't have to be, elbowing each other out of the way. It's like, I share open calls with my friends, and sometimes I don't get it and they do. It doesn't, I'm still happy that I'm getting my talented folks. I'm giving them that they're getting their due. It's not even like I'm giving them, but with Rootstock, I feel like I can give folks that opportunity.
That was Kundan Baidwan, artist, bartender, and organizer of the Color Your Mind Festival. I'm Jeff, and this is Storied San Francisco, a podcast all about the artists, activists, and small businesses that make this city so unique. In this bonus episode, which I did in collaboration with Aaron and Ange from Bitch Talk Podcast, Kundan is joined by her friend and fellow Rootstock Arts member, Samir Gupta. The two joined both shows to talk about Rootstock's inaugural Color Your Mind Festival, which takes place this Saturday from noon to 5 p.m. at Yerba Buena Gardens. The event will include music from all over the Indian subcontinent, art, dancing, books, henna tattoos, and more. Here's our conversation with Kundan and Samir.
I'm Kundan Baidwan. I was born in San Jose and was raised in Fremont. Lived there since I was like a year until I went to college in San Diego. Moved to Paris briefly, then to New York. San Diego for college, Paris for a brief stint, New York for a few years. I call that my postgraduate studies, though I didn't actually attend a university. It was the school of hard knocks,
School
I tell
of
you.
life.
And then came back to the Bay Area about 16, almost 17 years ago. And, 17 years ago. And San Francisco just felt like the natural fit, close enough to my Bay Area roots. But, after living in New York, city girl and me, I am an artist, a visual artist. I'm a painter, and I keep the lights on by bartending at Zam Zam.
Yeah, you do. That's where we met.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And Samir?
My name is Samir Gupta, and I also was born in San Jose. And at about a year old, my family started moving around every few years. My dad was working in IBM, and he would just take every possible position they would put him in. And so we lived in Japan, we lived in New York, we lived in Minnesota, we moved around a lot. I picked up music while I was living in Japan. It kind of caught the bug and made my way to playing drums. And then when we moved back to the States, I was realized that I was kind of a little ahead of the curve. I was also good at it, and it was fun, and it was something that I think my parents were not expecting, which also felt kind of fun, and so then I just kind of really stuck with it, and thankfully my parents were encouraging, and they said go for it, and I went to college for music, and that was all very Western European classical, but I was really gravitating towards jazz music. And then after graduating from college and working as a jazz musician for many years, then I got into Indian classical music, and I started studying the tabla, and that became a really amazing kind of reset on music. And then moved to New York, and actually Gundan and I, our paths have crossed several times, of course, through our lives. But I don't think we're actually in New York maybe at the same exact time.
We switched coasts a couple of times.
But when I was there, I was there for about 15 years and helped build some artist collective there, an artist collective called Brooklyn Raga Massive, which was cool. Nice. And now I'm back here, and
How long? have you been back?
I've been back about a year, maybe a year and a half, so pretty recent. But yeah, I mean, it's like kind of was coming back throughout the whole time and doing concerts here and keeping up the relationships. But really coming back to the Bay Area like didn't feel like it was in the cards. So it was kind of interesting to just get dealt that card and make it happen.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Well, I guess welcome back. I mean, your roots are deeper than mine, but it's nice to have you,
Thank you
with us here in this area.
We're here to talk about Rootstock Arts, but I do want to know how you two met and what was the impetus for Rootstock, and also why in 2024?
Well, we met. I say I've known Samir since before I was born. Our dads worked at IBM together. Our families had homes walking distance from each other. And I think our parents, both of our moms, were pregnant at the same time with our older siblings. And they had a joint baby shower. Like our siblings were born 3 days apart. So we were very intertwined.
There's a lot of pictures of us like super, super young at the same parties, and like, that old like 80s like faded kind of pictures, and then
a lot of plaid.
Yeah. There were some bell bottoms that peeked into those pictures too.
70s never die.
Yeah, and then we actually ended up in high school at the same time, which was pretty cool. That was like
Samir had said his family had moved away, but our families had kept in touch. Our parents had kept in touch, and then even though they were far apart, when they lived in New York, we would go out and visit them. We started doing like cross country, like sort of family trips together. And then they moved back to the Bay. We moved back to Fremont. We ended up in high school together.
That's right. So we were at the same high school in Fremont. And that was like such an awesome period because I feel like we both were involved in like really, really creative and counterculture things. And we were really finding our identity as like creative people. And that felt very like adventurous. Like we were reflecting on some of the crazy parties where I was like playing music, and Glendon I think was in the house just watching like all these high schoolers go like bananas. I don't know if you got in there, but
just watching, right? Not partaking.
No, nobody needs me on stage.
Glendon was like later I learned Glendon was like doing things that I was like, wow, you were off doing that? Like, wow, okay, I had no idea.
You were more of a Band-Aid, not a groupie.
Yeah. I was an artist too, so it was fun.
I was really square. Like I was super square. And Glendon was like, we're going to the creek. We're going to hang out. Like, Glendon had like a lot of black and like,
I had a slightly gothish phase.
Yeah.
I was going to say emo, maybe.
Yeah, I guess they would call it emo these days.
Which was also inherited from our elder siblings. I think there was like a lot of Depeche Mode, a lot of like,
Yes.
Yep. You speak in my
So
language.
I was like on a totally different wavelength. I was like the big time band nerd who just hung out in the band room because that's like the only place that I felt like I could be myself, And I think you also were in the band room a lot, or in the theater building, because there was like a bunch of like theater people.
A lot of there's like, I think all the creative kids, no matter what the discipline is, which when you think about it, is very much parlays into what our Rootstock's like sort of agenda, I guess, or mission is. You notice that like the art kids overlap with the music kids, overlap with the theater kids, and there's just like everybody kind of, there's a symbiotic. You might be in a different little group because unfortunately the clickiness of high school, but there was just kind of there. And I played some sports. I never really played on for a high school team, but I did City League. So there was overlap with some of the sports kids. So in some ways it was, you could kind of float. But it just felt really natural to float between all the creatives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think I was definitely identifying with that ability to access like all the different quote unquote cliques, but like they all kind of shared this safe space with being kind of like not fitting in with anywhere. And so that itself was sort of could be a safe space if you see yourself with other people who don't fit in. And so I do remember seeing a lot of people that were like in sports or in something that I was totally not into, but it felt like we had some connection in this like theater, music building. And I remember finding my, just recently I met my old high school band teacher, and I was like, first I like apologized. I was like, I was so bad. And she's like, no, you were just a high schooler. I was like, wow, that's very nice of you to say, but I know I was like a nightmare. But then I just told her, I was like, you created a safe space for so many different young people who just like needed to find something different or felt that they were different, and they needed to find some way to connect with people who they could feel safe around. And the band room was just like that. Like there was kids who were cutting class. They would just go to the band room. You know, there was like after school, you're just hanging out in the band room until like 5 o'clock until your parents came home and then you'd head home. You know, it just was, there was something about it that felt very like, yeah, like you're saying, it kind of set the groundwork almost for what we're trying to do with Rootstock, which is just like an open door, very accessible. You just have to sort of be engaging at a very, you know, meet us halfway type of thing. And then there's like enough there to build, you know, and I think that I think has inspired, you know, me for many, many years as far as that. Yeah. Miss Kraft. Monica Kraft was the name of that band teacher. I want to give her a shout out.
I was going to say how awesome it must have been for her to hear that.
She was actually one of my music teachers when I was in elementary school.
Amazing.
Wow. So yeah, Monica Kraft was, you know, even though I didn't go into music,
she's a local legend. I think so, because
I agree.
she actually she took the initiative to create a stage production of Pink Floyd The Wall.
Whoa.
And it involved like Irvington High School and Mission
Feels like a
San Jose
Wes
High
Anderson
Schools.
movie now.
Oh, it was wild, and it's the first time I had ever like, you know, gotten to see that entire album, like where I really like dug into that album. So it felt like an amazing education too, you know, about this like, you know, amazing creative work.
Right.
And we tried to do it justice. It was like amazing, you know?
Well, Samira, I know you said you're a square, but there's another way to listen to Pink Floyd The Wall. If you want, we can talk about it later.
Does it involve drugs?
Maybe not.
Schedules.
I've like tried to watch Wizard of Oz, and I'm like, what's going on? No.
Backwards, something plays backwards or something. Yeah. You both have mentioned that you're the only kids in your family that have chosen to create to have a career in the arts, coming from a South Asian background. So can you talk about how that has sort of informed you as an artist and sort of made you connect even more?
Yeah.
So I have a little amendment to that. My sister did actually end up, she is a writer. I think the distinction is that Samir and I chose a creative path from the get-go. Like that was what our degree was in university, and that's what we were pursuing. Yes, we've had other jobs to, you know, pay bills and whatever, but art or music, our own art has been our purpose kind of from education on. My sister was a lawyer for a few years, but she just, you know, we were discussing how all of our siblings had a creative outlet or, you know, something about them that they had a talent. But we're the only ones who just set out on that path. But my sister ended up abandoning her law career to get to her true passion, which is writing. It's for Hollywood, so it's got its whole, you know, machinery around that. And it's different than I think what we're doing and what we're trying to accomplish. But just wanted to say.
I think that is an important point. I think, like you're saying, in the South Asian community, I think there is a lot of creative people in there, and I think there's a lot of people who engage with arts, and they encourage their kids to like learn the arts, right? But I do think there's like a distinct difference when a young person feels that calling, and then they kind of push past the difficult barriers that go along with it culturally or just socially, and they stick with it and they find a way to actually make some semblance of a successful career. And like those terms are so different. They look so different than what the terms would be for someone who has a tech job or someone who has a job, you know, that with life insurance or, you know, medical insurance, you know. But I think that when you see South Asian like folks doing that, you know, and they stick with it and then they accomplish something, the next generation of young people who are feeling that calling, they do see like a potential path there, right? And I think that's really important to reflect, because it kind of comes from a counter, like I feel like, again, speaking a little bit about how we were involved in a bit of a counterculture in school, you know, like that counterculture pushes back on a lot of the systems that popular art consumes at, right? So my brother, you know, was a lawyer, and, you know, he also played guitar, and he, you know, it's really great to see how he engaged with art, you know. But I also feel a little bit funny because like he kind of roughed it. Like he was at like an elite Ivy League school, and then he like roughed it in Berkeley, right? Like, writing poetry like on Telegraph Ave, and like that's like enough to tick the box a little. So I'm just like, okay, like, you know, I love the thought of him doing that, but I'm also like, that's so different than like the lived experience of someone who, you know, has to find a way.
So because I grew up all here in the Bay Area. Samir moved around, but I had a lot of cultural influence within the Indian community. Because when I started out here, you know, our dad started out at IBM with a few other Indian gentlemen, and it was a time when the Indian population was growing. And as I was growing up, I was actually involved in cultural programming where we did dances at the Kaiser Center and, like, you know, big. It started off with little local stuff and, like, you know, just small groups of a few families, and then it was called Punjab Night. There was a great family, the Noahs, put it on, and it did want to make sure that kids knew a little bit about their background and the fun and the, you know, and it was just, I was very fortunate to have grown up around that. So yeah, but again, it was more of a, like, you do this on the side. This isn't something you focus on, and you know, I'm fortunate that my parents, you know, probably weren't super into my art choice as a degree at the beginning, but it really helps to do a really awesome portrait of one of your parents and gift it to them.
Yeah.
Pop still
definitely.
has, my dad still has that.
Yeah, I always make sure to, like, thank my family in the liner notes of my album, you know, like, no, I think that it's like a test, you know, for a lot of our parents to accept how their kids are really becoming Americanized, like, but it's also kind of like, how could they expect any different, like, you know, and the way that looks, you know, and just kind of accepting that it's hard for a lot of parents, I think.
And something you said earlier and what you just were talking about, it's a little bit of a buzzword, but representation, I think, is what we're talking about, right? Mm-hmm. How does that, or for you, how does that inform kind of what we're here to talk about, Color Your Mind? And maybe that can be your springboard to talk about what Color Your Mind is.
Yeah. Well, I definitely think that representation in this case is like representing artists and creative people and showing that, like, there is a healthy community there that deserves support and needs the support of audiences and people listening and people engaging, you know? So I think seeing young creative musicians who are using Indian music, in this case for Color Your Mind, I think ultimately, like, we're thinking much bigger. Like, it doesn't have to be a South Asian centered thing. It doesn't have to be Indian classical music. I think that is something that's very inspiring in this early iteration of what we're trying to do. So we kind of intentionally curated young artists so that it feels not quite so, like, hierarchical in a way. It's like, you know, it's not just about elders presenting a traditional form. Like, it's about young people who've dedicated a lot of energy to this and are doing a great job. And you feel blown away by seeing a concert of people who are not too far off in age from us, you know? Mm-hmm. So that kind of representation, I think, is important, is to sort of make it feel like it's not too far out of reach. You know, there's a lot of familiar things that people like about festivals. Like, we're getting, like, a henna artist, you know, we have, like, a pop-up bookstore, we have, you know, some, like, DIY crafts, artisanal crafts people. So, like, those kinds of things make it feel a little bit more like a festival that people would recognize, while, like, a typical Indian music festival maybe wouldn't have, like, those types of things. It'd be just, like, very formal, while this feels a little bit more, like, adventurous. And so I think that sense of adventure and how we program, I think, resonates and makes it feel like, oh, we're not confined to this, like, a conservative programming or traditional programming. And sometimes just the context that those programs are put on are put in a different context. And that's enough to make people realize, oh, this is way more modern than we would have thought, you know?
And approachable.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I remember going to classical Indian concerts when I would visit India, and, like, it's very quiet, it's very reserved, and it's very, you know, everybody's in dim light and everyone's focused on the, you know, and yes, of course, you want to respect the artists that are performing, but you also want to feel free to engage. And you know, if something makes you, I don't know, sometimes music makes me laugh, you know, makes me like, oh my God, that was, like, you know, sometimes when you hear a clever riff and you're like, oh my God, that was, you know, makes you kind of sit up and giggle. That happens with me. And you just want to be able to feel free and not have to just, and I feel like the same for the musicians, you know, I get to see people feel really relaxed and experiment. I mean, that's, I think while the baseline of the, you know, of the theme is Indian classical, they're all taking their own, using their own voice to display their their musical prowess.
Yeah, and I think we're really, when I was approaching some of the people we've curated, I was also trying to encourage them to think a little bit more progressively, like it's kind of like being anti-racist, you know what I mean? Like you have to actually see those structures to know what to push against, right? So like Indian classical music is primarily a male-dominated field, right? So like to curate and have representation of women in there, it has to take some very intentional work, right? So, and even not just like a woman singer, but her whole band is men, right? Like really like realize that that's very surface level, and how do you actually give some meaningful representation? And like for me, I remember just dealing with that question outside of music, right? Like just to throw it way back, the Robin Williams Aladdin, right? Yeah. No, I just, I remember when that came into theaters, I was like, I'm cool with all this. Like, I'm good with it. Like, like have all super offensive lyrics and like stereotyping. Like, this is representation, even like the Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. I was like, okay, like this is representation, I guess, like better than not having us in there at all, I guess, And so there's a side of me that's very accepting, I guess, of it, but then I didn't realize until later that was actually very like problematic, And so I think the extra effort to put in that extra effort, I think, is informed from my own experience of seeing how little effort can be put in and be accepted, right? Like, and it's really like, sometimes I think that's our responsibility as artists, is actually to do that, and to do it at a very like base level, to have that be the way that the soil is sort of, built, and that's, I think, like another, I guess, parallel with rootstock, right? It's like rootstock is like this part that you don't see underneath the soil. Like when you graft together two types of plants, like an apple or something, that is a rootstock, right? So you don't actually see the rootstock. And I think that was part of why I like that name too, is like, it's really not about us and like who we are, but it's just really about cultivating like a good, healthy soil, so that every influx of creative people that come into this area, they can engage with that. It's accessible. It's there for them. They can see like the different stuff that we're doing,
You have been touching upon rootstock, and I brought it up earlier, but I do want to know when the light bulb went off and you're like, okay, we need to do this together, because we've been in the arts so long. And because it's one of those things where we'll get asked, oh, how did Bitch Talk start, or how did Storied get started? So there's always the pitch or the conversation about it, but this has been your life.
I think Samir and I have collaborated over the years. I've done a lot of his album artwork, which has always been great, and he's sent me music and said, paint something or draw something, like we've worked like that kind of collaboratively. So I think we've always been dancing around, wanting to do something a little bit more structured together. And he had pitched it to me a little while ago, and I think when there was a possibility of I will be eventually maybe moving back to the Bay, and then the timeline just got sped up. And I mean, it's basically Samir's brainchild, but I wanted to work with him on a project like this, and this is how it has kind of manifested. But I guess you can.
Yeah, no, I think that's really says it well. I think that we had been already working a lot, and we really have a lot of mutual respect for each other, and we're also in very, very different industries, and I think that's also interesting for me, because I work with a lot of musicians, but I've also been in situations where you see how big the networks can be of artists. And there's an interesting thing that happens when you have a room of only one kind of artist, right? Like if you only have a room full of dancers, or if you only have a room full of painters, or you only have a room full of musicians, like there's a different kind of dialogue, there's a different kind of connection that happens. And so me realizing that, and realizing that, interestingly enough, I think about movements and communities, right? So a lot of times there's these big bubbles of creativity that happen, and sometimes music is actually like the backdrop of those kinds of things, like the music is there, but it's what people sometimes get is like the visual art of that movement, right? Like they hear they get the poetry, they get maybe the the impression, like the sort of residual vibration of what was maybe happening in the room, which sometimes could be a very musical type of thing. Like could be certain bands are really activating, or there's a certain musical style that's getting activated at that point, and it sort of activates other creativity, it activates other artists. And so, I kind of like the idea of that synergy between art forms. And so I really like thinking about having Rootstock not just be about music, but really have it be about other art forms. And so I really wanted to turn to Gundan and tap her for her expertise, because she has cut a lot of years doing this professionally. And some of the achievements that you've reached, I think, are very similar to like the achievements that people see in music, where like I've put out some albums, right? So I have some understanding of how to put out a record. I've signed a record label, like, I've signed a record deal, so I kind of know what goes into that a little bit. You've gotten your work put up in, public transportation, and
Yeah, I mean, I'm still, I have some stuff hanging in a couple of different spots right now, and I yesterday put my own submission into an open call. We're still both pursuing our own thing, but it doesn't mean that we can't still create opportunity for other artists to have platforms. And if we can, and that's what I love about artist communities and the crossover that we're trying to create, is that we can all kind of help lift each other up. It doesn't have to be, elbowing each other out of the way. It's like, I share open calls with my friends, and sometimes I don't get it and they do. It doesn't, I'm still happy that I'm getting my talented folks, I'm giving them that they're getting their due. It's not even like I'm giving them, but with Rootstock, I feel like I can give folks that opportunity. And with the Color Your Mind Festival, there's going to be a gallery tent, and that was my first time ever putting out an open call. It was really daunting. Like, a lot of this is daunting for sure, particularly for me. Samir at least has a background in nonprofits, but I'm really just trying to get my footing here, and it felt really good to see the responses piling up, and and really having to come down and make some hard decisions because there was so much talent. And please, if you guys did submit and I didn't choose you, I really am honestly going to tap you guys down the line.
Next time.
It felt really good to see that this community is, as fledgling as it is growing. And yeah, just again, look across the board, visual artists with dancers, with musicians, with whatever, we can all create a symbiotic platform, and that's hopefully what Color Your Mind is going to be on July.
I mean, I also love the sentiment of what you're saying, where we really it's hard for us to just think about oh, these are the 5 artists that we like done, moving on. These are our 5, period, right? There's a sense of, well, there was 20 people who applied, all of them, we've all been there, and I think that is the part where we are actually a little different, is we put in that extra thought to realize this person went through just as much effort as an artist who maybe got the work, and they deserve some acknowledgement of that. And so, we try and put in the extra effort to say, hey, still stay engaged with our community. We have these artist gatherings in West Oakland a couple times a month, and those are meant to be Rootstock artist gatherings where it's actually hosted by a great vegan chef named Philip Gelb, who's been doing dinner concert series for about 20 years in West Oakland out of his vegan loft. He's published several vegan cookbooks too. So he hosts our artist gathering, and we kind of tell all the artists that we know from different disciplines to come. It doesn't cost anything. You just have to RSVP. We break bread. We talk. It's not really a performance-based environment, which was also very intentional. Some people were like, oh, I want to perform for other artists. And I was like, actually, I think that maybe unbeknownst to us, is when we perform for other artists, that can be a very intense sense of am I good enough? This person is better than me. They're so good. Am I that good? And it can create a dynamic there that I felt is counter to the sort of egalitarian goal of saying, just because you're an artist, because you chose to center the arts in your life in some way, you have just as much of a place at that table.
Your mission statement might be a little more vague, but your events are very specific, and that's what I'm really excited about this Color Your Mind Festival, which is happening on Saturday, July 27th, right, from 12 to 5 p.m. at Yerba Buena Gardens.
Yeah.
And this is a celebration specifically of South Asian classical music with a modern twist, right? Do I have that right? So can you tell the people, because we want them to be as excited as we are about it, sort of what can they expect about music-wise? Because I love the idea of people being exposed to all these different cultures, so they can't just say that we're all the same, right?
So like for the music, I wanted to make sure there was like kind of three distinct sections that are represented. So North Indian classical music, which is really popular, like from people like Ravi Shankar, and Ali Akbar Khan, who's like a local legend. He actually lived in San Rafael, and he has a long legacy with a school here. So a lot of North Indian classical musicians are in this area. And so Ali Akbar Khan's son, Alam Khan, is the one who's going to be performing like the headlining set at 3:30. And he's great. He actually plays a lot of non-traditional stuff, but I specifically wanted him to present classical because he's so good at it. And if there's going to be someone who represents like the depth of Indian classical music, I want it to be, him doing that on North Indian classical. And then before him at 1:30, there's Rupa Mahadevan, who's representing South Indian classical music, which is a very, very different style. And I specifically was asking Rupa, I was like, can you possibly bring some percussionists in? Because in South Indian classical, they have like more percussionists. There'll be multiple percussionists playing at the same time. So it's rhythmically like very, very different and very special for that. So I wanted to kind of get both of those on the bill. And then my own project, which is kicking off the festival at noon, is called the Jupiter Project. And that is more progressive, experimental, or contemporary, whatever you want to call it. But it's improvising from a much more like a cross section of different styles that I like. So it's bringing in a lot of jazz music, a lot of modern improv that's free from any kind of jazz per se genre. And also some Indian classical in there as well, and trying to approach it in a way that kind of shows the expansiveness of the influence of Indian music. So starting with something experimental at noon, South Indian classical at 1:30, and then North Indian classical at 3:30.
And then in between, there's going to be spontaneous dancing by Leela Dance Collective.
Yeah, along with Classical Revolution, which is a long-time San Francisco collective on classical music. Yeah.
So while they're doing the stage turnover between the musical acts, there's still a feast for your eyes. They're going to be dancers, and then like I was saying in the back, behind the sound booth, there's going to be the tents where we're going to have the DIY bandhani kits, some Indian tie-dye, Hamesha Project. It's all natural dyes. It's going back to the roots of how it used to be done. Medicine for Nightmares is going to have a little bookstore stall. We're going to have a group of henna artists, and then there's going to be a gallery tent. Like I was mentioning earlier, we did an open call for art, and we had to whittle it down to 5 artists, and they each have a very distinct style, and I'm really excited that this is, we're just so close, and I think we're all just getting a little antsy, and can't wait to kick it off. It's going to be hopefully a really awesome day of just all sorts of, like I said, never a dull moment.
Yeah. I think you're right. It's going to be packed. And I mean, I'm really excited about the tents too. Like, I know that my kids are going to be in line for the henna, for sure. And then I love the idea of having a pop-up bookstore.
I'm going to be first in line.
Get out of the way, kids.
Of course.
Yeah. Medicine for Nightmares is actually like where we're recording this podcast too. And they've been really like early supporters of Rootstock. So once a month we do an Indian classical sessions here where we book 4 20-minute sets, and it's like a little bit of a showcase. It's very casual. It's not meant to be super formal. And again, to create a lot of accessibility and kind of lower some of the defenses that people have around some of these styles of music. And so Medicine for Nightmares, I was like, can we do a pop-up bookstore possibly? And they were into the idea. So I love the idea of like someone listening to Indian classical music and perusing books, or waiting in line for henna. Those kinds of things are slightly different, but they also feel really fun. So I'm excited for all of that.
I'm going to be elbowing people for a Kundan original. I'm like, gimme.
I'm not going to be displaying.
Well, one of the cool things about the tent gallery is that we wanted to do 100% of the sales to artists. Which again, when I one of the things I learned from Kundan was, sometimes with artists putting up visual stuff in galleries, they do a 50-50 split. And just knowing from my own experience what it is to split 50-50 of a door at a live show, I have a aversion to that, and I was like, that just didn't sit right with me. And the more artists I talk to, they will always just be so appreciative when that moment of selling it, really the lion's share goes to the artist. And so that's been a very important part of what Rootstock does. And at this tent gallery, that's going to be the model.
Yeah, I think Samir was like, I don't think he had realized, because probably never had thought about it, but when an artist goes to do a pop-up show, or even a show, in a gallery space, or, I show it at Mini Bar, pretty regularly. You'd have to put all this effort forth for, to display it, to make sure it looks good, to, have everything set up, and you're not guaranteed anything, So if you sell, and then you gotta 50-50 is like the high-end gallery type of model, but, a lot of more local shops take a much lower cut, but still you're like, man, I put all that effort in, and I still gotta shell out a little money. Sometimes it just takes a little sting, and to be able to just be like, yeah, I'm gonna put all the effort in, and at least whatever I sell, it's mine, and pay your taxes, kids. But
that type of thing that seems so different from what we've sort of accepted as career artists. But I think that when we look at it from the receiving end of that, I think we're able to see there's no reason why we shouldn't be getting a lion's share of this, and so I also sometimes just think we accept some of the systems that are put around us, and when it comes to artists, we are at the mercy a lot of times of those things, and we just feel like we have to accept them when we don't, and I think when there's opportunities for us to change that conversation and possibly change those systems, I'm all for having that conversation.
I think that's kind of really the heart of the heart of Rootstock is let's just let's flip it back to being artists first.
That was Kundan Baidwan and Samir Gupta from Rootstock Arts. Follow them on social media at Rootstock_arts. Check back next week for part 2 with Ezekwe Z. Anderson of Rise Up Bakery. That drops next Tuesday, wherever you get podcasts. Music for Storied San Francisco was produced, performed, and curated by Otis McDonald. Aaron Lim of Bitch Talk Podcast is our contributing producer. And the show is produced and hosted by me, Jeff Hunt. Now in our 6th season, we have more than 200 episodes available on our website, storiedsf.com, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're able to, please rate and review the show, and drop us a line at storiedsf@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Keep rejecting those silly doom loop narratives about our city. Stay wacky, weird, healthy, and creative. And we'll see you next time on Storied San Francisco. We acknowledge and respect the first humans of the unceded land we call San Francisco, the Ramaytush Ohlone. We condemn the genocide of these and other tribes across the Western Hemisphere. We honor their legacy and history, and we support rematriation and sovereignty efforts.
This podcast is a proud member of the BFF.FM podcast network. Learn more at podcasts.bff.fm.
BFF.FM, best frequencies forever.